My wife is tough, but she shouldn't have to be tough on account of me. She shouldn't
That's a
have to
good
be. I shouldn't be the reason that she is calloused, right? In some way, I should be the safe place for her. And I think so many times as husbands, we wield our words without that occurring to us. That we're so familiar, and we are overly tough and overly combative at times with our wife.
Welcome to the Focus on the Family broadcast, helping you and your family thrive in Christ.
John, right at the heart of Focus on the Family, it's about marriage. I mean, that is the foundation. Of course, first is your relationship with Christ, but second is marriage, and then the kids, and making sure that's all moving in a godly direction.
Mm-hmm.
And man, we believe in marriage, and we also believe marriage, it requires some work. You got to work at it in order to make it thriving and good. And sometimes we do it well, and sometimes we don't do that very well. And today is going to be one of those days we're going to be talking to men and you wives about how men should be communicating. And this is going to be a little rough for me.
I'm glad you're smiling about that. I think most of us know I have some shortcomings when it comes to marital communication.
Okay, so right before we are going to air here, I was talking to a colleague, and she said, "Oh yeah, I just called my husband the other day, and my plan was to ask him what he wants for dinner." He answered the phone like, "Yeah, what do you want? I'm in a pinch here." He said, "I just want to know what you want for dinner. Why don't you get out of your work voice?" That's kind of what we're talking about today. So how do we lead our spouses in a better way when it comes to communication?
Right, and Ryan Frederick has a passion for this. He is an author, and he and his wife, Selena, have been with us here before on the show.
Yeah.
They minister to couples and families, and of the books he's written, we're talking today about one that is right in alignment with what you've been saying, Jim, How a Husband Speaks. The subtitle is Leading and Loving Your Wife Through Godly Communication. And of course, we have copies of the book here at the ministry. Check the program description or give us a call. 800, the letter A, and the word family.
Ryan, welcome back. Good to have you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a joy.
That's so good. Yeah. Hey, you've taken up a bold charge here to help men strengthen their marriages through their communication. So I guess the right first question is, what led you to do this?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think what led me to do this is my own need to grow and my own, I think, experience in growing. I've been married 20 years plus, got married young. It wasn't until I think in my 30s that I actually feel like I understood communication, at least the way God would have a husband communicate. And I'm thinking maybe I can help some guys not have to wait quite that long.
Yeah, we're all going, you did that in your 30s.
Yeah.
Way to go. I'm still working on it.
I'm an underperformer.
I think I became aware that I need to work on it. I'll put it that way. Yeah.
It's so funny because that's one of the things that has struck me. I think mentally I understand it. Of course, I read the Word and I pray and have a relationship with Jesus. But this area is an area that I certainly struggle with. I can't speak for every guy, but I think generally the guys I know and talk to about this, we all kind of struggle with how we express ourselves in tone and in tenderness or lack thereof regarding our wives. And I think that illustration I mentioned a moment ago is really indicative of the problem, right? When your wife calls you at work and you're going, "Yeah, what do you want? What do you want? What do you need?" And she's going, "Hey, I'm not your business colleague. Stop talking to me like that."
Yeah.
So what is she expressing when she responds like that?
So that's what I call the husband paradox, right? So right straight back to the garden. Men were created to work, to do things, and we have a certain potency in that regard. If we don't know how to flip that switch when it comes to cultivating, and we come back home and we're not actually seeing our bride as the gift that she always was, you have to turn the toughness off, right? So you have to be outwardly very tough for your wife, but inwardly inside the household very tender with her. And so it's that paradox of having to be tough for her, but tender with her. And I think that's what she's responding to, is some of us, this has never been me, of course.
I have a friend.
Yeah, I have a friend. Now, we don't know how to turn it off, right? You're always kind of on.
Or you have a runway. I'd like to say it that way, because I think I'm aware of it, but sometimes when you're coming home from the office, and Gina and I used to talk about this, I'd have to flip the switch. And some days, I got home too quickly, and I'm in the door, and I'm still in work mode. She would call it work mode. You got to get out of your work mode. Oh, okay. What does that mean?
Yeah, and sometimes even, guys, you have a better tone with your colleagues, and you have that familiarity that grows, in the house.
Yeah.
And you know, that's another.
Let's go to the general communication idea. So, you know, what impact does communication, good or poor, have on a marriage, and whose responsibility is it to kind of be the gardener of that communication?
Yeah. So you asked why I wrote this book, and I think another reason is because communication is, I think, the linchpin for marriage, right? If you can communicate well, you can get through almost.
It's typically
anything.
why divorce occurs.
Right.
A
It starts
lack of
with
communication.
Yeah, and so if you're not communicating, eventually that turns into bitterness, turns into anger, it turns into, affairs and things, because you're not actually working through things. You're not going to your spouse in the covenantal context that God's given you. Mm-hmm. So I think if men, you asked who's in charge of it. This is why I wrote the book for men. I think men are the buck stops with them, right? Women, wives, need to be good communicators as well. And they're not off the hook, but the buck stops with the husband. Mm-hmm. Like when Eve ate of the fruit and then Adam ate of the fruit, God looked at Adam and said, "What has happened?" Right? He looked at him, and so I think we are the ones that are charged with loving in this way, leading in this way. If the communication culture in the household is souring or we're growing distant, I don't look to the husband and say, "How are you going to solve this? How are you going to break the ice? How are you going to start melting the ice? How are you going to start reestablishing those lines of communication?" If you can do that as a husband, you can work on anything once you get the communication lines cleared.
Let's look at some underlying premises of communication. We know from Genesis that a husband and wife are made to complement each other. Right. We talk a lot about that here at Focus. So often opposites attract because we're attracted to something we're not.
Sure.
You know, if you're extroverted, introverted, they tend to go together. Not always, and I know that's the 80-20 rule. But some couples take issue with this idea of complementing each other and being each other, being a helpmate for a woman, let's say that. So biblical roles in the modern age now are very distorted.
Yeah. Yeah, so the challenge there is, if you embrace that, like what I just said about husbands being kind of the buck stops with you, well, that goes back to the garden, but I think it also goes to the New Testament, obviously, Ephesians 5, where Paul says, "Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church." Like husbands and wives are both called to love one another. We're both called to honor the Lord in our marriage. But the call to husbands was to love like Christ. And what did Christ do to love? He died. He loved sacrificially. We don't see that call to wives. Now, as Christians, wives are called to love sacrificially. But in the marriage, like if anybody's going to die for this thing, it's going to be the husband. It's going to be the husband putting himself on the cross, so to speak, and saying, "I'm going to love you sacrificially so that the marriage can flourish." Now, the flip side, and this is the part that bristles against our culture, is the wives submit to your husbands. That's the helper side. And this, I think, the main thing that needs to be articulated is it's not about power. It's not about greater worth. Instead, it's about roles and order, and it's about the structure that God gave us so that we might flourish. It's not about, what our society would make it out to be.
Yeah. I read that. It's kind of interesting because, of course, in a corporate structure, you need that. It's called a job description, and it outlines what you have authority to do, what you don't have authority to do. It's kind of interesting to bring that into the marital concept. I mean, it's a little rough to say, it's like a job description, but it does function well when there are clear roles. But there is a bristling. I mean, we don't have a woman at the table to say, "Wait a minute, guys," So, kind of give us that overview of why the roles are important. Yeah. We know what God has said. We can read the Word. He laid out the descriptions for us. But men can abuse that, and then it gets all off on a wrong track. And but when it's functioning in a healthy way, it's beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, you ask, why is it important? And then you, I think, answered your own question. Is because God gave it to us that way. He said, "Do it this way. This is the way that I've designed it so that you might flourish." And are we as Christian men and women looking at that saying, let me weigh that against my own sensibilities. Let me weigh that against what culture is showing us. Or are we saying, God has spoken. Now, how can I obey? How can I trust him as a husband and choosing to trust him and now lead as a result? A wife choosing to trust God, now submit as a result. Not because somebody else has said it, but because God has spoken. And if that's not what makes it valuable, I don't know what would.
So. As we're talking kind of up here at this level about communication, you've expressed in the book that you see an element of grace, or that communication itself is a grace.
Yeah.
Unpack that a little bit for us.
Yeah, so God has revealed himself to us. And how has he done that? Well, he spoke creation into existence, right? We have general revelation. We see God in a sense. We see his fingerprints on creation, I should say. But then he revealed himself again through words, through Scripture, through the incarnate Word, Christ himself. So words are a grace. Words are how we know other souls. Like we wouldn't know what God hath decreed unless he told us, unless he made it known to us, that we might then listen and hear the ideas, and he's given us the grace to understand. So in marriage, it's, I think, exactly the same way. It's a miracle. It's how you, like, think about everything that happens in mechanics that goes into us talking right now, right? You're thinking thoughts, you're putting them together into words, you're flexing various muscles to make air come out through your vocal cords. I'm saying things, they're coming across, they're vibrating through the air, going into your eardrums. Your eardrums are reverberating. Like all these things are happening, and you're processing it instantaneously, and we're sharing meaning. Like I can know you because you're telling me something. You can know me because I'm communicating something. In marriage, it's the same way. I think the challenge is we either take that for granted, or we're not sending signals that are really meaningful and not communicating well what we actually mean. And so we talk about in the book sifting through the signal and the noise, being high fidelity communicators, knowing as a communicator I need to get rid of as much noise as I possibly can. And then as one receiving communication from my wife, I need to try and identify the signals she's sending and sift out the noise, things like tone, things like...
You know, Ryan, one of the things, temperament must play into this too. Sure. And you have a spectrum of capacity for communication. I would say a more introverted man struggles communicating. Not to lay a label on it because there's no stereotypical type, but the quiet guy, the quiet man. It's probably what may have attracted her in the beginning. He's solid as a rock. He's steady. He's quiet and just goes about taking care of things. Yeah. But at some point that may raise its head, and the men say, well, you knew what you married. You knew I wasn't very verbal. I told you I loved you at the altar, and that should have been enough.
I'll tell you something changes,
that's
right?
the old saying, right? Right. So how does a guy reevaluate that and keep trying to improve in that communication, not just rest and give himself that label that, hey, I'm just not that type?
Yeah, and that's one of the main thrusts that I try to get across in the book here too, is that communication is a skill. Like it's not something that it comes wired and you're kind of just given whatever wiring that you were born with and you need to just deal with that. Because a lot of guys, I'll talk to them. I was this guy where I'd say, hey, I'm just not a talker. I don't need to process things in this way. I don't need to, and some of that's still true. But for the sake of loving my wife, I can learn a skill that will allow us to flourish. I can learn not to just fall into whatever my basest tendencies are in terms of under-communicating or reading into things the wrong way. And so it's a skill that can be learned, and I encourage men to do that and to do it and to master it.
This is Focus on the Family with Jim Daly, and our guest today is Ryan Frederick, and we're talking about some of the content in his book, How a Husband Speaks, Leading and Loving Your Wife Through Godly Communication. We'll encourage you to stop by our website to get a copy or give us a call. You'll find the link in the program description, or our number is 800, the letter A, and the word family.
Ryan, I met your wife, Selena, when you were both here and we were covering your book, Fierce Marriage. Yeah. And that's a good title for her. She seems like a tough as nails kind of woman. Yeah. How would that play into those heated moments of conflict between you? We're kind of revisiting that content, but two powerful people talking something through that can be either good or bad. Yeah,
this was a conviction that just as a young husband, and looking back, any guy would say this, right? Look back and say, man, I can't believe the guy that I used to be. And I used to be pretty harsh. And we've never had, we don't call each other names. We don't have kind of a lot of vitriol, but you have your own way as a husband, right? You can be overly harsh with your wife, or you can, and so the conviction I came to is that, my wife is tough, but she shouldn't have to be tough on account of me. She shouldn't have to be, I shouldn't be the reason that she is calloused, right? In some way, I should be the safe place for her. And I think so many times as husbands, we wield our words without that occurring to us, that we're so familiar, and we are overly tough and overly combative at times with our wives. So that was a conviction I had, and so I'm encouraging men to I think more clearly about their own. We talked about this toughness in terms of work, but also just toughness in terms of familiarity.
Yeah. Hey, in the book, you talked about climbing Mount Rainier, and what I really wanted to ask you is why? No, I'm kidding.
Because it's there.
I have flown over it a few times on my way to Seattle or whatever, but it looks like a great mountain to look at. Yeah. But you decided to climb it, and what did you notice about the peak when you got there, which way to go. I'm glad you got there.
Yeah. Well, if you've ever flown over a mountain peak or you've climbed it, it occurred to me that nothing lives up there, like nothing. Like it's completely barren, completely
Just dirt and rock.
Yeah, and so I think the reason I brought that up in the book, I talk about that experience, is that there's a mountain that many men climb, and if they try to stay up there, whether they mean to or they do it unwittingly, stuff dies, right? And I call it Mount Foolish, and I talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect, where as you learn a new skill, sometimes your own pride will get ahead of your competency. So a lot of guys they think they don't need to learn how to communicate better, and they kind of stay on Mount Foolish before they are humbled to the point where I need to learn, and I need to not pretend I know more than I know. And so it's urging guys to say, hey, I don't know everything that can be learned about how to communicate with my wife. I'm gonna descend off this peak where everything can die, Mount Foolish. I'm gonna come down into Humility Valley, that I might learn how to love my wife well, and then over time, your competency grows in a commensurate rate with your ability.
We said earlier, Ryan, that you hear from men who have hit tough spots in their marriages, and they tell you they've tried everything. It usually means they've missed something. What do you say in response to them saying, hey, Ryan, I've done it all, but it's not working?
Yeah, well, try more.
Keep trying.
And keep communicating through it. And obviously, if you can't do it on your own, then get good men beside you and good pastors beside you.
Well, it also might mean you're not trying in the right way.
Sure.
I mean, that would probably be the right rational response to that. Then, doing something over and over again and getting the same result is not what you want.
Yeah, I mean, a marriage takes two. So if you've got, there's a lot that can go into it. Now, if a husband is at a standstill and he is trying to communicate, men around him are saying, hey, you're seeing this clearly, that's maybe a different conversation. But in many cases, it's just, you haven't quite tried everything.
You had a pretty powerful illustration about compounding communication in the book.
Yeah.
That 30-day thing, I was like floored by that.
Yeah.
Explain what the
so the question is, if you could have $1 million today, or a penny that doubles every day for 30 days, what would you have? And of course, the answer to these sorts of questions is always the non-intuitive one. And so if you took $1 million today, that's great, you'd have $1 million. But if you waited 30 days, you would have less than $1 million, clear up to like day 20 something. But then after that, you would end at over $10 million. And the point I'm trying to make.
Wow. I got to do that math. I'm going to go home tonight and sit and count this out.
So at a penny a day, it seems like you're giving up a lot, but then it compounds over time. And the idea there is, it comes from Proverbs 6. I think it says, look to the ant, right, who is always working, always storing up. There's wisdom in the incremental gains. And so encouraging guys to not just try to fix it all at once, but just do one small wise change every day. Yeah. Keep doing it. Now,
well, that's really important because guys can get overwhelmed. Our brains are pretty limited. We got to focus on things. That's why men, they say, psychologists, men, the best chefs are men. We have this ability that God's given us to really zero in on a task.
Right.
But at the same time, it means we aren't hearing anybody around us. We are focused. Yeah. And that's both a blessing and a detriment.
Yeah. So you don't have to fix it all at once. That focus, reject that and say, I just need to do one thing that I wouldn't have normally done. So I'm going to send my wife a loving note. I'm going to wait. I'm not going to react. Instead, I'm going to respond. Or I'm going to, I'm not going to read into it like I normally would. Instead, I'm going to ask her to clarify. So these are all small little things that if a husband can just do one thing every day or so, you'll have $10 million.
It'll be worth more than $10 million.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. You also talk about couples having a shared language. That sounds romantic and poetic. What does it mean?
Shared language.
Hey, Gene, you want some lunch with me? You want to eat a meatball sandwich?
Yeah, that can go two ways, right? We talk about familiarity. You can be familiar in a sense that it's causing isolation in your marriage. Or you can have a familiarity where you can walk into a crowded room and you can look for your wife and you can make eye contact with her and cast her, some sort of smirk or a glance or a wink or something that is going to speak to her. That's built over time. And so the same thing happens in terms of your communication culture in your home, right? So either your shared language is going to be fostering a healthy communication culture. That's going to be something that your kids are going to observe. They're going to want to, because it's building life. Or you can have a shared language that is, negative or you're walking on eggshells all the time because you're always waiting for the next explosion to happen type of thing. Yeah. So I'm not sure if you were going there with that, but yeah, couples can share language in many ways, and they can share culture, and certainly they build it together.
Let's hit the last analogy I wanted to touch base with you on was you talk about in the book being quite a daredevil, jumping off high places into bodies of water, and you want to make sure certain things debris fields aren't there. Speak to that analogy, and then how does that fit with marriage and communication?
Yeah, so the example I share is I was scaling the side of this cliff there's a river in Mount Rainier, and the river had a log jam. And so I've fallen into water. That's not a big deal. The water's cold. I can swim. All that's fine. But a log jam is virtually unsurvivable. And so I was genuinely scared. I thought, I might die in this place. And I think a lot of guys get to that place in their marriage where they're hanging on by a thread, and they can see the log jam developing. They can see they're headed for it, and they don't know how to get out of it. And so in the book, I give a number of tools to help them break that log jam. The only way you can break it free is you just got to pull one log out at a time. And what are those logs in your marriage that are keeping the communication from flowing, that are going to kill you if you don't break this thing free?
What are some examples, just so we can catch it?
So often we can overlook this, but just pray. Pray, ask God to help you, reveal areas in your own heart where you've been hardened and you're blinded to maybe things that are too close to your face. Whatever he shows you, then repent of those things. Like that, it's funny how that has nothing to do with talking to your wife, right? You're talking to God, you're clearing the lines of communication between you and God. Then you can begin to see clearly what these logs actually are, and you can go strategically and pull those out. Some other ones would be like confirming and clarifying meaning. So you talked about tone being a big deal, or my wife, she'll say things, and if I don't confirm what she means, like there's been times I'm completely on a different page. She thinks I can read her mind. Sometimes I can.
It's fairly common,
right? And so I confirm that meaning and clarify. That's a huge log that you can start getting out of your communication log jam, so that you can start to actually talk about these things again.
But they do take discipline. One is overlooking annoyances and offenses. Yep. I mean, I think our flesh, we love to keep score. So, you don't want to say, well, you remember 14 years ago.
Right.
This is what you said to me.
Right.
What? So, I mean, that's a discipline, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but so often those types of the things that are truly not really forgiven at that point, if you're still harboring it against them. And so you need to set the stage, I think, as a husband to do that work, to say, listen, this is an issue that we have dealt with, or if that's what you're talking about. Yeah. But we need to actually sit down, have some time, whatever that means, get the kids somewhere, set the stage. That's part of the plucking out the logs, right?
And in there, the two that seem contradictory, I know they're not, but I'd like for you to explain that. One is use your manners. So that's always a good idea.
Kind of basic stuff there.
But then also be honest in your communication. Guys can be brutally honest. We tend to, okay, yeah, you want my honest opinion? You don't look very good in that dress. But that's not good manners. So some of these things can collide, right?
Well, that's part of being able to send clear signals, because, yeah, you can say a true thing, but saying true things doesn't mean you're right. Now, it doesn't mean you don't say the true thing, but you need to say it in a way that the signal is not lost in the noise, right? Just the brash, okay, you want my honest opinion? You don't look good, right? Okay, well...
I have never said that. Right. Jean looks great in every dress she's ever
Just
put
for
on.
the record, I would say the same thing about my wife.
It makes me kind of nervous hearing you say that. I'm like, dude, you need to write another book.
There's a big pregnant pause right there. We were feeling that.
But I appreciate your honesty.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Or another one would be like, you want my honest opinion? I think your mom talks too much, or whatever the thing is, right?
And you're hitting all the hot buttons.
Yeah. But the point is you can communicate that in a way that is going to be heard, or you can cloud it with all the noise of your inability to do it lovingly and articulately.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, this has been such good material, and Focus is here for you. That's the thing. We got to make sure that we alert you to that. We're for your marriage. We've been at it over 45 years. Give us a call if you're having some struggles. We will do everything we can do to help you. Mm-hmm. The first thing is a free assessment that couples can go to the website and do. You can do it as an individual or a couple, and it's free. And it'll give you some areas that you're doing great in and some areas to work in, and then link that to some of the resources here at Focus that can help strengthen those areas where maybe you're not scoring as high. It's just a good way to get a gauge on how you're doing in your marriage. Of course, Ryan's great book, How a Husband Speaks, Leading and Loving Your Wife Through Godly Communication. this is here for you as well. And like we often do, if you can make a gift of any amount, monthly or one time, we'll send it as our way of saying thank you for being part of the ministry and helping other marriages to thrive in Christ.
Yeah, join the support team. Find resources like that marriage assessment, Ryan's book, and page 91, the chart. We've got it all in the program description for you.
Ryan, again, thank you for being with us. This is great material.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us today for Focus on the Family with Jim Daly. I'm John Fuller, inviting you back next time as we once again help you and your family thrive in Christ.